So when I add prerequisite projects, for instance, you notice that I get some more additional projects added to my list here. I have Neighborhood Watch, which is actually one of my ongoing projects, and it's linked to online vehicle registration, meaning that that Neighborhood Watch project needs to be complete before the online vehicle registration can begin. You'll also see I have some linkages further down, even amongst the pipeline projects themselves. The second thing I'm going to add now is the resource constraints. And those are illustrated by the histogram on the bottom of the screen in blue. So each project I had, based on the business case, I'd estimated some man hours required to complete that project. And as you can see, I have a bottleneck here in the middle when all of those projects are stacked on top of each other. So I have the dependencies to worry about, I have the resources to worry about. So what I want to do now is open this up for editing and allow myself to move those bars back and forth. So in the editing mode, for instance, I can take the solar panel farm bar, and we can see that it needs to be completed before the new water treatment facility can be started. Now there's a chance, of course, that the solar panel farm will go over schedule, so I want to just move that up, and then I'll move my water treatment facility back maybe a couple of weeks, just to make sure I don't have an overlap. And of course, by doing that, you can also see that I'm slowly leveling out my resource plateau there as well. Another thing that I could do to help alleviate that, for instance, might be to move my Governor's Library project up. So there's a few different things I can do, and of course I want to be cognizant of those dependencies as well as I do this. In demonstrating this final capability, I'll also be using the visualization feature. In this case, the elements in the middle of the screen are ongoing services that are being considered for termination or postponement. You'll notice the user-generated criteria in the upper right have been customized specifically for this exercise. Using the scoring from each criterion, I can make a decision about which ongoing services are the best candidates for termination based on current budget constraints. Now I could do this cost-cutting exercise either with ongoing projects or with ongoing services. In this case I'll use services, but the big difference being that since a service doesn't necessarily have an end date, it has an annualized budget, whereas since a project has a very fixed time frame, it has a fixed project budget. So I've included some criteria here to demonstrate that annual budget mentality. So the top one I have here, remaining budget year to date. When I start deselecting services, I'll see that drop, and what that means, of course, is the money that I expect to save through the rest of this calendar year or this fiscal year. And naturally, if I deselect that service, the budget for next year will be cut accordingly. I also have some positive criteria that I want to maintain. A lot of these services deliver some real benefits in terms of even dollar value or some more fuzzy numbers, and those can be included, and we want to maximize those, of course. I have performance score. This is an aggregation that I've created to determine if projects have been performing well in terms of their schedule, their budget, their thresholds for customer satisfaction. So the wider the bar, the better performing that service has been. Of course, public popularity. We want to have services that the public likes, and we want to make sure that we're weary about cutting the most popular projects and services in this case. And of course, strategic objectives. Even though we might be in a short-term scenario where we need to cut costs, we still want to keep an eye on the future and make sure that we're not compromising those long-term goals by making short-term decisions. So just like I did with the pipeline projects, I'll start by deselecting from the bottom, since the mental health workbook has been a pretty poor performer for us, especially compared with something like e-visitation, which has a great performance score, a high popularity, and high strategic alignment. The mental health workbook is probably where we want to start in terms of descoping these services. So if I just, for example, cut the bottom three services here, you'll notice already in terms of remaining budget that we've cut this year's budget already by 26%, and we've cut our next year's budget by 29% already. Now, if we have deeper cuts that need to be made, we can start trimming again from the bottom and cutting those services. But the point here is that we want to minimize the budget, and at the same time continue to maximize those things that are important to us: benefits, performance, public popularity, and maintaining that strategic drive. So we could use this format. We could change the criteria rankings, for instance, and of course we don't necessarily need to deselect the bottom projects. Obviously there might be some other criteria at work as well. But this is just an excellent way to visualize, first of all, those services in order and really understand the trade-offs and understand the impact of making those cost-cutting choices. I'll quickly recap the capabilities of this solution: government accountability. I mentioned earlier that cities often lack real-time overviews that help managers quickly pinpoint troubled spots and address them in the earliest stages. I've demonstrated how Focal Point provides customized dashboards, tracking and alarms for budgets, schedules, resources, compliance, and risks. These indicators not only provide information on the health of your projects and investments, but you can drill down to detailed project information to help understand why a project is underperforming and attempt to get it back on course as soon as possible. Citizen-centered prioritization. I also mentioned that cities often have trouble including the voice of the citizen in the project and investment selection process. I've demonstrated how you can incorporate both objective and subjective criteria, such as public popularity, to generate an integrated view of which projects and investments are the most valuable. And finally, the cost-cutting optimization. I mentioned the difficulty in justifying cost-cutting decisions internally and externally. In Focal Point, I've demonstrated how to create a visual environment where you can test different cost-cutting scenarios that affect ongoing services. When the decision is made, you can point to the visualization not only to justify why the decision was made, but also which criteria and stakeholders were involved in the process. This concludes the presentation. I hope it was informative. If you're interested in knowing more about Rational Focal Point for Smarter Cities, please contact your IBM representative or visit the website listed here. They can provide you with information on pricing and implementation, as well as Focal Point solutions for other sectors and applications. Thank you for your attention.